6th deer. And the other good ones, there are no deer anymore.
Is it red?
Mr. Mayor, it's time.
I'd like to call this special meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Donald Hewish,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tempore Margaret Morales, Councilmember Mitch Lindeman,
Here.
Councilmember Dania Acosta, Councilmember Ray Shelton,
Here.
Councilmember Michael Valdenegro,
Present.
Councilmember Jose Grijalva,
Here.
City Manager Ana Urquijo,
Present.
City Attorney Dennis Fitzgibbons,
Present.
City Treasurer Luis Pedrosa. Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, for the record, Mayor Pro Tempore Margaret Morales and Councilmember Tania Acosta, I believe she's running a little bit late, and Mayor Pro Tempore Morales is excused.
Thank you very much. Item number 3, persons wishing to address the council in writing or verbally on any item not on the agenda. Do we have anybody this evening?
Mr. Mayor, I do not have any requests.
Thank you. Item number 4.
Oh,
Yes.
1 second. I believe we have one.
Would you want to speak to the airport T hanger item? Okay, well, I'll hold you till then, if that's okay. Item number 4, discussing decision on approvals. Item A, second reading of ordinance number 22-1152, an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing the sale of semi-improved parcel of land located on the southwest corner of 15th Street and Van Buren Avenue. Foothills lots 22 through 26, including block 30, with assessor's parcel number 410-32-121 to Encarnacion and Nadia Denise Baez, pursuant to terms entered into by the parties, establishing severability of components of ordinance and establishing an effective date thereof. Mr. Kiko? Please, or Luis, you have this one?
I can take care of it, Anna. Is that okay? You're on mute, Anna.
Sorry about that. Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Pedrosa.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. This is the second reading. This ordinance, as you recall, the city went out to bid for the vacant lot sale, which used to be an abandoned well site. On May 11th, Mayor and council awarded the bid to Birds Construction for purchase price of $56,500. Birds Construction backed out. During the process of the second reading, and the second bidder, Encarnacion and Nadia Denise Baez, increased their bid to $60,000. Mr. and Mrs. Baez plan to build 2 homes on this parcel that will be in conformity with the Douglas Municipal Code and zoning regulations. The attached purchase agreement contains the conditions of the sale. The buyer is responsible for all closing costs. 5,000 earnest money is required, and all sale price amount shall be paid upon closing, and there is no city finance included. Staff recommends approval of the purchase agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Pedrosa. May I have a motion, please?
Mayor,
Yes, please, Mr. Valdenegro.
I move that the mayor and council approve the second reading of ordinance number 22-1152 by number and title only.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Valdenegro, second by Mr. Shelton to approve the second reading of ordinance number 22-1152 by number and title only. Questions or discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Lindeman,
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta, Councilmember Shelton,
Yes.
Councilmember Valdenegro,
Yes.
Councilmember Grijalva,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, motion carries.
An ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing the sale of semi-include parcel of land located on the southwest corner of 15th Street and Van Buren, Foothills lots 22 through 26, including block 30th, with assessors parcel number 410-32-121 to Encarnacion and Nadia Denise Baez, pursuant to the terms entered into by the parties, establishing severability of components of ordinance and establishing an effective date thereof.
Thank you. Item number 4B, discussion decision on approval of second reading of ordinance number 22-1153. An ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing the purchase of real property located at 1300 North San Antonio Avenue, Douglas, Arizona, at a purchase price of $900,000, approving the purchase and sale agreement and escrow instructions with Pacific Resources Associates LLC, authorizing the mayor and city manager to execute all necessary documents, establishing severability of components of ordinance and establishing an effective date thereof. Mr. Kiko, please.
Still muted, sorry, Mayor, members of the council. We're here again before you for this purchase agreement, second reading for purchase of the Food City building. We do have some minor edits from your first version at first reading, which I'd like to make sure that our city attorney just summarizes high level. They were minimal, not really any substantive issues, but they did take place over the last week as part of our negotiation to finalize the purchase agreement. Again, the recommendation of staff is trying to move the city to a better position. We feel that purchase of this facility will pose as an advantage to the private sector, potential, hopefully some grocers that are looking to lease or buy from the city. And we see this as an investment and a need for the community, as stated before. We have been without a second grocery store in our community now for a little over a year, and we feel this is a great investment and opportunity moving forward. So with that, I'd like Mr. Fitzgibbons to just summarize briefly on the slight modifications that you do have now a revised version, but I'd like him just to point out the minor changes that were made from the first agreement.
Thank you. Mr. Fitzgibbons, please.
Thank you. Mayor, members, council, first change is actually in paragraph 2. They've now identified the First American Title Company that's going to handle the transaction. I know you're going to see Portland, Oregon, and wonder what that's all about, but that is the title company that's already done title work on this property and had already worked on this property before. So it looks like they'd probably be the most efficient people and we think cost-effective people to do it. The next change you'll see comes in page 5 and J and K, really minor changes. One on J is, we said good and markable title. They just changed to fee title. We don't see any issue with that. K now gets into the environmental. We were saying not to their actual knowledge, and they just have changed that to say that seller has not caused hazardous substance, hazardous pollutants on the property. There's a couple of minor changes throughout that paragraph. The next changes are in L on page 6, where they've actually identified, when we say to seller's actual knowledge, they've identified 3 individuals who that will pertain to. The only main substantive change is paragraph N has been revised. Here, what they're asking for is a release of the buyer, of the buyer to release the seller, Pacific Resources Associates, at the time of closing, from any and all potential causes of actions due to zoning or environmental laws. We don't see this as problematic, simply because if somebody created an environmental problem on the property, it probably was the tenant. And therefore the tenant would be liable for that. And because Pacific Resource Associates have never engaged in any type of activities on the property, we find that request by them to be reasonable under the circumstances. We know we're buying the property as is, and we doubt that Pacific Resources, that entity, has caused any potential problems to the property. If any problems were caused, it's going to be from the tenant that was on the property for so long. So we didn't see a problem with that. And then the only other change is in section 802. The only other change, it just talks about, they've reworded the paragraph that says if seller fails without legal excuse, convey the property when required. We're fine with that. And then since you've seen this agreement, they've now added all the people that get notice of the agreement. That's on page 11. And other than in 12, other than that, any of the other changes were extremely minor.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgibbon. Anything else to add, Mr. Kiko?
Mr. Urquijo, you're muted.
Apologize. Circling back to just finalize the recommendation from staff to utilize funding from the current 4.3 million unrestricted general fund reserve as mentioned at the last meeting, with the expectation to have a return of investment over a 10-year period. And we have lined up commercial inspectors and are ready to take place, to have those inspections, take place as soon as we're able to enter into contract and go through a due diligence period. So this, in fact, just gets us one step closer to be able to secure the contract and move forward with a hopeful transaction. So with that, Mayor, back to you.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion?
Mayor,
Yes, please, Mr. Lindemann.
I move that the mayor and council approve the second reading of ordinance number 221153 by number and title only.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lindemann, second by Mr. Grijalva to approve the second reading of ordinance number 22-1153 by number and title only. Questions or discussion?
Mayor,
Yes, please, Mr. Lindemann.
regarding this item, I believe that all my concerns were satisfactorily answered last meeting, and I will just state that I think this is a very important move that we can make to invest in our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, please, Mr. Grijalva.
I think this is a great deal for us and, if it passes, maybe it'd be great if staff can put, something on social media to tell our community how much they were selling it for and how much we got it for. Our plan to get our money back, who we're buying it from, because there's misconceptions out there about who owns the building and what we're going to do with it. So if maybe staff can communicate with the community through social media or, just maybe we can have town halls, that would be great because of all the misconceptions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grijalva. Anyone else?
Yes,
Mr. Shelton, please.
Luis, what was the first figure they gave us? How much did they want for it to begin with?
Mayor, Mr. Shelton, it was going for 2.1 million.
We're getting it for 900,000. So, and I think my main concern is if there's something wrong with it, we can still bail out of it. But I'm gonna say yes with a little bit of reservation because it's a lot of money. And but if we sit on our duff and do nothing, that's what's gonna happen. So I think this will be a good thing for us in the long run. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shelton. No duff sitting around here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, please, Mr. Valdenegro.
Mr. Perosa, do we have a timeline to the renovations of this building once we have it purchased and sealed, deal, anything?
Mayor, Councilmember Baldenegro, I think that will be established once we do the inspection and really know exactly the conditions of the building and establish that first. And at that point, I think we can do a timeline. Know that construction is really different with how we're dealing with that today with timelines and logistics. But we can certainly establish that once we know exactly the work that would be entailed.
And if I may add, Mayor, also to that timeline, we will prepare a timeline on next steps toward opening up a bid for prospective grocers as well.
Is it gonna be done in-house or we're gonna contract it out? Depends on the work.
Mr. Pedrosa.
Mayor, Councilmember Baldenegro, most likely we plan on contracting it out based on what we've seen on the surface, HVAC, and the size of the building. We have certainly tossed around the ideas of potentially bringing in some of our own labor forces and inmate labor. We can certainly look at that for sure and save some dollars doing that. But it's gonna play a role as far as how efficiently and quickly and we want to get this job done. And so those are factors we'll look at. But yeah, everything's on the table, I think, as far as resources that we can utilize.
Thank you. Anything else? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Lindemann,
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta, Councilmember Shelton,
Yes.
Councilmember Valdenegro,
Yes.
Councilmember Grijalva,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, motion carries.
An ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, County, Arizona, authorizing the purchase of real property located at 1300 North San Antonio Avenue in Douglas, Arizona, at a purchase price of $900,000, approving the purchase and sale agreement and escrow instructions with Pacific Resources Associates, South LC, authorizing the mayor and the city manager to execute all necessary documents, segregated components of ordinance, and establishing an effective date thereof.
Thank you. Item number 4C, discuss and decision on approval of resolution number 22-1530, a resolution of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing the city of Douglas to accept grant funding from Walmart in the amount of $3,500 as part of their fiscal year 2022 community grants program. Chief Fullen, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The city of Douglas has been selected to receive grant funding from Walmart as part of their fiscal year 2022 community grants program in the amount of $3,500. This grant opportunity is part of Walmart's commitment to giving back to the communities where they operate. A proposal was submitted in support of 3 programs provided by the city of Douglas through collaborative efforts by a police, fire, and library staff. The police department will use $2,000 to support our 2022 Kids and Cops program. The Douglas Fire Department will use $500 to support their 2022 holiday food, toy, and jacket drive. Both of these events focus on less fortunate families and those families that are otherwise struggling during the holiday season by providing an opportunity for department employees to make a positive impact in these community members' lives as well as their own. And lastly, the library will use $1,000 to support their 2023 summer reading program. This is held during the first week of June through the last week of July, right before school begins again. The aim of the program is to keep kids engaged with reading and learning in a fun way during the summer months and to help stem the summer slide. And they have a fantastic program as part of that. Staff is requesting approval and acceptance of the grant funds.
Thank you, Chief. Ms. Andrade, would you please note that Mrs. Acosta was able to join us at 5:48.
Thank you.
May I have a motion regarding this resolution?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Grijalva.
I move that the mayor and council approve resolution number 22-1530.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Grijalva, second by Mrs. Acosta to approve resolution number 22-1530. Any questions or comments?
Mayor,
Yes, please, Mr. Lindemann.
I just want to say, thank you again, Chief Fullen, you and your staff bring all these things, to us, and that's wonderful. Thank you.
And I would just like to add my own thanks to Walmart and specifically Mr. Richard Yanes for helping facilitate this. So thank you all.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Lindemann,
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta,
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton,
Yes.
Councilmember Montenegro,
Yes.
Councilmember Grijalva,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, motion carries. Item number 4D, discussing decision on approval of resolution number 22-1531. A resolution of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing the execution of memorandum of understanding between the city of Douglas and the Society of Saint Vincent de Paul, Douglas, for the establishment of a community garden within the city of Douglas, Arizona. Mr. Kehoe, please. Or would you like Mrs. Gonzalez?
Yes, I just unmuted. Is Ms. Gonzalez present, or Mr. Pedrosa can present? It's hard for me to hear. I apologize.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As you may recall, during the coronavirus pandemic, the city of Douglas was awarded in two separate tranches, CDBG funds for coronavirus relief. From the first tranche of funding, those funds have all been expended for public services to include rent, utility, mortgage assistance payments, food services, COVID-19 testing, and all of those services were for the benefit of the entire community. During the third tranche of funding, we received an additional award, and the majority of those funds have been expended, but there was some money left over from some projects that we had proposed that were unable to be carried out just due to the time constraints. And so we are proposing to transfer the amount that is left over, 21,500, to a local nonprofit, St. Vincent de Paul, to establish a community garden.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion?
Mayor,
Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Botanero.
I move that the mayor and council approve resolution number 22-1531.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Botanero, second by Mrs. Acosta to approve resolution number 22-1531. Any discussion or comments?
Mayor?
Yes, please, Mr. Lindemann.
I think this, yet again, another good, community, thing that we're gonna do, but, my question is, if we turn it over to St. Vincent de Paul, will they be able to keep us in the loop as to how they're doing and where they're gonna put it and things like that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Lindemann, absolutely. The grant requires us to continue reporting on how the funds are distributed and utilized. And so through a memorandum of agreement, which is here for your consideration tonight, St. Vincent de Paul agrees to all of the requirements under the grant, and we will be reporting to the government on how we expended those funds.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mayor,
Yes, please, Mrs.
do
Acosta.
we have a location for this garden is gonna be?
Yes, the designated location will be in the St. Vincent de Paul parking lot. They've dedicated a space that they're gonna fence in. They actually went to the design review board last night to get approval for wrought iron fencing. And that's where we're gonna start the setup, and hopefully it continues to grow.
Yes, and also just wanted to add, I am happy to see that this is coming to fruition. I've been asking Ms. Urquijo since she got here, if there was any way to get a project like this going for the community to come together and learn a very well needed skill, I think. Thank you.
I'd like to add that St. Vincent de Paul is always open to volunteers who want to help install and tend to the gardens. So any interest in that would be much appreciated.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hearing none, roll call, please. Oh, please, Mr. Shelton, please go right ahead.
I've got a question. I think it's a great idea. But we're going to do that. You get the thing with religion and making them, public money going to a church or a organization like that. Should we make that little piece of property maybe our property? I don't know. Dennis, what is your take on that?
In Councilmember Schultz, I didn't hear the question. I think it had to do with public money going to a church. I think we're good here because we have very, very specific MOU with them that they're gonna have to follow and provide updates to the city on how the money's being spent. And it's being spent for a community purpose. And my understanding with regard to St. Vincent de Paul is they provide services to anybody in the community and not based on, religion or anything like that. So I think it's clearly a community purpose for everyone. And I think we have pretty tight controls on the money that's going to go to them and our expectations that they're going to fund this garden, the maintenance of it and the upkeep of it for a very specific period of time.
Okay, that was just a thought that ran through my mind because there might be some people out there.
Yeah, the assistance that the nonprofit provides is non-denominational.
It is.
Anybody can go and ask for assistance and they're
Okay,
not
I
denied.
just wanted to, get that point clear. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Grijalva,
Yes.
Councilmember Montenegro.
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton.
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta.
Yes.
Councilmember Lindemann.
Yes,
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, motion carries. Item number 4E, discussion decision on approval of resolution number 22-1532. A resolution of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing a lease agreement, scratch purchase. Sorry. A lease agreement for individual T hangars located within the Douglas Municipal Airport with parcel number 410-01-005 and granting the city manager authorization to execute 12-month lease agreements with individual tenants for aviation purposes, establishing severability of components of resolution and establishing an effective date thereof. Mrs. Urquijo, please.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As a summary on this item, 30 years ago, November 12th, 1992, the city entered a partnership with Shady Place Incorporated to construct 10 T hangars and at the Douglas Municipal Airport and entered a 30-year, $1 per year rent or lease with the city for the construction of that facility or those hangars. And they constructed that on city land. And the lease is now at that point where it's 30 years of $1 lease amount has expired November of this month, November 12th of this month, at which point the T hangars revert back to the city under the original agreement. There are currently a total of 10 private fully enclosed T hangars at the airport. 8 are 25 by 44 feet and 2 are 25 by 65 feet. And so 2 of them are a little larger. They operated the T hangars through the 30-year lease at $1 rent and providing a liability insurance to the city throughout that entire period. Now with the city gaining ownership, staff has been working with the tenants with Shady Place, and last night met with the airport authority members to bring them up to date on the plans that the city has for a blanket lease agreement moving forward. So I know the package in your agenda today reveals a recommendation from staff of $150 per month for the 8 smaller hangars and $200 per month for the 2 larger hangars. And that was after consultation that Mr. Pedrosa and I had with some of the tenants and with Shady Place. After last night's airport authority meeting, review of the lease was discussed, and a few areas were brought up by the committee that we took into consideration today to try and get this executed. And we are making a recommendation or a modification to our recommendation as a result of some of the comments heard. We feel that it makes sense to do so. We are below market in our lease amounts. However, we know that there are some improvements at our T-hanger sites that need to be made over time, and we do have some plans underway to do that. So it is our recommendation to bring those lease amounts for the 8 smaller hangars to $125 per month and the 2 larger hangars to $150 per month. Those lease amounts are not in the current lease agreement because it's a blanket lease agreement. So those recommended lease amounts that I just mentioned would have to be read into a motion if council so chooses to follow that that recommendation by staff. The lease will be for a total of 12 months, where we will at that point reconsider improvements made, and we'll continue to test market rates as well. It is our intent to get closer to market rate over time. There are a couple of other areas that were discussed by the airport authority members last night that had to do with automobile insurance under Section 5B of your lease agreement. We checked in with our legal team today and with our insurance brokers and realized that that was more of a blanket language and makes sense for general liability on the hangars, but not necessarily for vehicle coverage. So we did lower 5B, and you should have received a red line version today, from $1 million, $1 million limit to a $100,000 limit for that vehicle coverage. And in addition to that, there was a concern over a section on maintenance of any aircraft or plane in the T-hanger when it had to do with mechanical work on the fuel system. There was a restriction that any fuel system could not be down for more than 48 hours. So we took that into account. There wasn't a very specific reason to have done that other than these are efforts that these lease agreements for T-hangars put into place to ensure that we are not renting space for just a warehouse of plane parts and as such. So legal did place some language in there that states or something to the effect of or otherwise or as otherwise approved by the city in writing. And we can go into some of that directly. But those are the modifications that were made today that you did receive. And as a result, you now have this blanket lease agreement, the 30-year $1 lease period that allowed the city and the private sector to partner to build the T-hangars at the Douglas Municipal Airport, served a much needed purpose in the building of this facility at our airport. So after the 30 years, the investment is now paid back to the private sector, and the city can manage the ownership of these spaces as other airport operations in the state do as well. So staff is making the recommendation for approval of this blanket lease agreement to be utilized with each current individual user or other interested party if spaces become available. I'll add that we have in the last several days mailed out or emailed a letter to each of the current tenants, advising them of the plans to move forward with a copy of the draft lease agreement. We will follow up after today, if approved, to send them the modifications that are really in their favor after hearing from some of the interest last night at the airport authority meeting. So with that, I transition that back to you, Mayor, and I know we have an interested person to speak to the item as well.
Thank you. May I have a motion?
Mayor,
Yes, please, Mr. Lindeman.
I move that the mayor and council approve the resolution number 22-1532 with the addition of the moderation of the $125 per month rent for a 25 by 44 foot T hanger and a $150 per month for the 25 by 65 foot T hanger.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lindeman, second by Mr. Shelton to approve resolution number 22-1532 with the fees of $125 per month for a 25 by 44 foot T hanger and $150 per month for a 25 by 65 T hanger. Questions or discussion?
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Lindeman, please.
I think that if you have rental of the T hangar and you have your airplane there, doesn't your regular insurance cover your car to drive over there and work on your? I'm not sure on that, so if somebody can clarify that for me. I don't know why it wouldn't cover, you know. you go
Mr. Mayor, I can take that one. Mr. Mayor, we think it would cover it. We think the normal auto liability insurance coverage would cover the automobile when it's on the airport property.
Mr. Fitzgibbon, my understanding is that it's just that they would have to show that they have those amounts,
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. That's correct.
not a separate policy.
No, not a separate policy. We just want to make sure the car that's on the airport property is insured. So they just have to show us that.
Thank you. Does that
Well,
answer your question?
yeah, the 100, 300 is the standard, I think, on automobile insurance policy.
Pretty much. you need-
And so if that's going to cover that, then I see no problem with that. But thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shelton, please.
Yes, you can always think of this too. There might be a car out there that hits a plane. And you know.
But then their
therefore-
insurance has to cover it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And not necessarily the plane hitting the car even, or
But I think,
something else happening to the car, but you know,
I
it
think the
happens.
crux, the
Yeah.
crux of it that has been answered is that
Yeah.
this is not a separate policy
Right,
that
yeah.
first has to take out. So,
No, oh, no.
yeah,
not at all.
there we
Thank
go.
Do you have something else, Mr. Shelton? Okay, thank you. Yeah, yes, please, Mrs. Acosta.
So I had the chance to attend last night's Airport Authority meeting. And I actually got a lot of good insight from the members there of the Airport Authority. So I understand that the future looks bright for future improvements of the airport, but from what I understand is that the condition that it's in right now is poor, making it difficult for some of these aircraft to come in and out, and even at night. I guess one of the things that was mentioned was there should be no nighttime flights coming in or out of our airport due to the poor lighting and the conditions of the runway. But so with that being said, going from $0 rent, based on that older agreement from 30 years ago, 250, and now to 125, it still seems kind of steep to me. Being that, the facilities just aren't really comparable to anything else out there in the market, and wherever it was that studies were done or comparisons were made to get the market value for leases, it just, I don't think that we can compare what we have to offer. So that's my first point. My second point is what I also understood from last night's meeting was that most of the airplane owners out there are hobbyists. So it's not necessarily a business use for them. And it just seems like we would be hurting our airplane community. And quite the opposite. I think we should try to foster that, especially, having a community college that offers these airplane pilot programs and airplane mechanics. And I don't know if I can recommend right now, but maybe even lowering that rent even more to begin with, just to ease that transition from the $0 rent to now a constant monthly rent.
Okay, would you like to amend the motion to that effect?
Sure. I would like to amend the motion for the leases to begin at $50 for the 25 by 44 and 75 for the 25 by 65.
Is there a second? Hearing none, the motion fails for lack of a second. Would Mr. Kiko or Mr. Pedrosa like to comment as a little bit more about how you arrived at those amounts?
Yes, I will begin, and Mr. Pedrosa may have something to add. So, Mayor, members of the council, one of the promises we used is that we currently do have a rental fee in the big hangar, the large hangar of $100, and we use that as our benchmark, especially after comparing with some of the T hangar lease agreements that Mr. Pedrosa was able to use to create kind of a market rate, and still even then staying well below that. We also based it on direct conversation with some of the tenants and local owners and, leaseholders of the current T hangars, and came up with our first recommendation, which is in your packet after that discussion, based on 150. And then last night brought it down even lower, but our benchmark was based on our current amount that we do lease that. Mr. Pedrosa may have information on those comparators that were used to establish the below market rate. We also, if I may just fill in that initially, before we decided to go individually into a lease agreement with each individual tenant, we went back to Shady Place LLC, or Incorporated rather, to see if they would take on the umbrella again at a reduced rate. And that's when we did offer $100. They were not interested in doing so, not when it became something other than free, basically. And so we entered into these individual discussions, considering that we would be administering. And that's when we used the $100 as a benchmark. So that's a little background as to how we came up with that.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, please, Mr. Baldonado.
Mr. Fernandez is gonna speak to us, or?
Yeah, as soon as we're done.
Okay, I just want to
Because
point out that,
we're gonna call.
the lockers that people rent out there in Douglas, a 10 by 12 lockers goes for about $100. It doesn't have, some don't have lighting, electrical, or anything like that, but a 10 by 12.
Just the regular storage locker,
Yes,
you're
sir.
saying.
Regular storage locker goes for $100. So this lot being what it is, if we can make renovations to it, add electrical, whatever it needs to. Did you have electrical? Or whatever else the hangars need to be, so it could be a competitive market rate value, what I mean? I just want to point that out.
Thank you, Mr. Baldonado. Anyone else on the council?
Mayor,
Yes, please.
I would like to make a motion to amend the amounts one more time.
I was gonna-
To amend it from it's $75 for the 25 by 44 and 100 for the 25 by 65. And I'd just like to add to, I know that the community hangar is rented for $100 a month, and that's community space. However, again, something I learned is that some of the aircraft in that community hangar is larger and would not fit into any of these smaller hangars. And to Mr. Bandanegro's point, I think comparing storage lockers to airplane hangars is, it's just hard to compare. You're comparing something two very different things.
Thank you. So there's a motion to amend the amount per month to $75 for the 25 by 44 foot and $100 for the 25 by 65 foot hangers. Is there a second? Hearing none. Motion fails for lack of a second.
Okay,
Mr. Shelton.
okay. I went out there today. I'm on the Airport Authority Committee. And I'm like Ms. Costa, that I think it was a little bit high, so I'm going to make an amendment that we go 100 for the 25 by 44 and then 125 for the 25 by 65. It's been in my thought process all day. And if we do this for a year and then upgrade it and do a lot of other things that we might be planning with the airport, that then we can up this. So
Thank you.
I'd like to
So-
make that amendment.
So there's a motion on the floor to change the monthly fees to 100 for the smaller hangar and 125 for the larger hangar. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Shelton, second by Ms. Acosta to reduce those amounts to $100 and $125 respectively. Any further discussion before we hear from Mr. Fernandez?
Mayor,
Yes, please.
I have a question. All these suggestions are coming from the meeting last night, if I'm correct. Some members of the airport authority own property, rent some of the hangars. Was anybody recused from that discussion? Because it seems like a conflict of interest. I don't know if Dennis can.
Mayor, members of council, it was not a voting item. It was just a discussion and information item. I don't know, Dennis, maybe you can add to that, but they were not recused, and yes, some of them are currently tenants.
Right, and Mr. Mayor, members of council, they don't have the final authority here. So I understand Councilmember Grijalva's point. I think it's an excellent point. But in this instance, it's the council that has the ultimate authority. So as long as, and so they can give their opinions to the extent council wants to accept those opinions, that's up to council. But the fact that they're simply giving their input and opinions, I don't believe constitutes any type of conflict of interest that would somehow not allow this council to vote on that. I clearly understand your point on this, Councilmember Grijalva, that they clearly have an interest in it. But since this is a council decision, they're just giving their input is not going to somehow take the decision away from council. Because at the end of the day, it's council's decision. So I think council's fine voting on it.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please, Mr. Shelton.
Yeah, we're not at the Scottsdale Airport or the Paradise Valley Airport or the Prescott Airport. We're in Douglas right now, and I just think we need to get the ones that don't have planes in there cleared out, and then we get a good reputation. And then after that, hopefully we'll have more planes coming in and, then, we can up this. And this is, what the policy says here, year by year, we can, up it if we see fit. So that's just my main concern right now. And, anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Shelton. I'd like to call on Mr. Carlos Fernandez, who has requested to speak to this item. Mr. Fernandez, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I haven't addressed y'all in a long, long time, so if I do it inappropriately or don't follow protocol, please stop me as you've done.
3 minutes.
3 minutes? All right. I'll stop. The contract, first I want to say thank you very much for all the hard work that you've all been putting into, in particular the staff. There's some activity going on. There's attention to the airport that hasn't been there for a long time. To be honest, evident in the product that you guys are leasing. It is lacking a lot of things. Runway, we don't really have. It's a very dangerous runway, to be honest. We don't have much maintenance out there. There's weeds in front of the hangars, which causes fog, which interrupts airplanes. Lighting system's not really adequate. And there's not much fencing. You guys have cows on the runway. Okay, before you have to take off, you have to check and make sure there's no cows on the runway. Okay. You guys are talking a lot about the fees, and I appreciate that. I was talking with many folks about the different fees, etc. It's not for me. It's for folks like Javier right here. Javier has a plane in there. It's guys that they've been saving for the last 20 years by plane because they're in love with aviation. It's $20,000. They've been saving. They finally got it. They can work a little bit. Those are the guys that we're hurting. And you're saying conflict of interest, or you're saying storage fees. They have not been paying for a long, long time. And it's true. They got return on investment 10 years after the fact. But this is a new fee for them that they haven't had before. Okay. They can barely afford gas at this point. So they are enthusiasts, they're hobbyists. It's a small, fragile aviation community. And I hate to harm them by taking the thing too high. The discussions you have right now are wonderful. It's honestly, all those things that you've suggested has been, I think, decent fees. It's not market, and I don't suggest even looking at market, just kind of what the product that you're selling. And I do appreciate the negotiation. Thank you. The contract itself, it's very obvious that lawyer did look at it because it's very, very protective of the city of Douglas, as it should be. However, I feel it's extremely restrictive for what it is, an airport hangar lease. There's a lot of things you can't do in here. It even talks about hazardous materials restrictions. You got gasoline, you got oil, you got hydraulic fuel. You can't keep anything. You can't keep a case of oil in your hangar now, according to this contract. We just got it Friday. I talked to some of the folks just this week. We talked about it yesterday in the airport authority meeting. My heart thinks that we should not vote on this today until we go through it in detail, unless it's open to be able to tweak it a little bit as needed. This is above and beyond the fees. That's just my recommendation on this, my suggestion, my hope, that we look at this a little bit further. It's restricted in that you guys are wonderful folks. You guys don't have any ill intent, but this thing's will be in concrete. And so when you guys are all gone and you guys come in, we might have another lawyer, etc. We want to make sure that those guys in the future aren't restricted by this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. I appreciate that. Couple of questions come to mind, timing wise, and you mentioned in the background information that the actual T hangars are ours now as of 11/12/22. What type of liability does that put us into if we don't have any signed agreements? Or when would that need to happen at the latest?
We do, Mayor, members of the council, we did direct this as the first of the month following for that reason. I would defer to Mr. Fitzgibbons to a legal issue if there's any liability beyond the first month, the first full month that we would enter into a lease agreement.
I think, Mayor, members of council, my understanding is the current insurance holder has extended the insurance to the end of this month. And so I think it would be important for us, if we're gonna take it over and to have lease agreements in place so people know what the rules are. I don't think it's anything completely set in stone. I think council can approve this agreement tonight with the fees you want to, and direct staff to come back in 90 days or come back in 120 days. And if there's changes that need to be made to these leases, that we've lived with it for a few months, we can make those at that time. But I think it's important, at least once the insurance, we know the insurance is going to be extended to the end of this month. But after that, I think we're, as a city, we want to make sure we're going to be covered for anything that's out there.
Thank you. So in other words, council, if unless you want to come back and meet the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, which still doesn't give us much time, that's the 29th of November. But I also appreciate Mr. Fitzgibbons stating that you know, if it does need to be looked at, we can bring it back up in 60 days, 90 days, where we think. Another question regarding the specific of hazardous materials on site. I know it cites a lot of regulations, which of course I didn't take the opportunity to go look them up. I admit, but do they, for example, are they allowed to have those hazardous materials on site if they have a proper storage unit, meaning a cabinet or anything else like that? Would that be allowable? I know that's an extra expense, but is that something that are within those regulations that are cited?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think as long as everything is properly stored. Now, there's a specific provision with regards to spillage and cleanup and how things need to be handled that way. But as long as things are properly stored, I think those are things that are normal for people that are trying to maintain an airplane. I was trying to look at Mr. Fernandez. I was trying to figure out what provision he thought prohibited that storage of things that would be common for airplane maintenance. And so I was just looking at it quickly, but to me, if it's, as long as it's stored properly, then I think it would be fine. There is specific, if there is spillage, there's specific provisions on what they have to follow to do that.
Thank you. Does that make sense, Mr. Fernandez? Please, please.
Mr. Mayor Hughes, I'm like you, as soon as you get into environmental, which was pretty much the bulk of the contract, kind of glosses over. But a couple things did stand out. If we look at B under compliance, the first sentence says, tenant shall not cause or permit any hazardous materials to be used or generated or manufactured, produced, stored, brought upon or released on, upon or about the hangar, airport property, or transportation thereof. That's pretty restrictive, if you ask me. Doesn't say anything about, well, if you keep it stored right or anything. It says you can't even use it.
Do you see that, Mr. Fitzgibbon?
I'm not sure where he was,
It's on page number 5B, subsection 1. Under compliance, subsection 1.
well, I think that's, I mean, with regards to releasing any type of, hazardous material, clearly the sections regarding airport maintenance or airplane maintenance, aircraft maintenance allows general maintenance to be done in the hangar. I think that's the specific provisions that deal with being able to do airport maintenance. That's in section 10. So I would think under airport maintenance, adding oil, adding fluids, things like that to an airplane are clearly allowed under the lease. I think, but the fact is you're not going to be able to take and release or put or place onto the ground out there anything. We're going to want to make sure our ground is not somehow contaminated by some type of, product. So, I mean, as long as they're putting the oil in the plane, I don't think we have any problems. As long as they're doing general maintenance to the plane, clearly allowed under the lease. So I don't find any problems with that. If they find going forward that there's something they feel they're not allowed to do, I think we can address it in the future. I don't know if that's cause for not approving this tonight, if council wants to get this approved in place on December 1st. So I don't mind if Mr. Fernandez has specifics. It's clear under section 10, they can perform airplane maintenance. They can do aircraft maintenance there. They can do all of that. So I think that would include, if you do change the oil of a plane, that would include all of that. It's just you can't spill it on the ground and cause it to create any type of liability to the airport property.
So in other words, Mr. Fernandez, that's the intent. However, I read what you're saying and it doesn't appear that way. So it would be something that we could possibly work on and clarify and make an amendment in the next month or two.
You know, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, but at the end of the sentence, I read that it says if it's, or in violation of any environmental law. So if it's in violation of any environmental law, those things are prohibited.
Those are the ones.
Right, so I would ask Dennis if that's the intent to really say if there's any violation going on while those activities are happening, any violation of any environmental law that currently exists, not that we're imposing new ones. To me, that's what the way it appears to read.
So it's over and above any normal maintenance type things. It would be something that's strictly outlawed already.
That's
what.
the way I read the final part of the sentence of section B1.
I like the way you said that. If I-
Mr. Mayor, I agree with my co-counsel, Mr. Pedrosa.
Thank you. Please, Mr. Fernandez.
I do contracts, nothing like your attorney. That's his thing. But I do go over contracts on a regular basis. And intent can't be there. Like you just said, intent means nothing. It's got to be concrete.
Right.
And like I spoke earlier, you guys have wonderful intent. I'm worried about the guys down the road. And this isn't for me. I'm worried about the next generation, all the other guys that will be using hangars. So I just want to make sure what we do today is what will affect literally generation down the road. That's all.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And that's something that, maybe Dennis, we can look at as far as any clarification or being able to explain that in a separate document to that we can attach to the lease or something along those lines. Any other questions or discussion?
Mayor,
Yes, please.
who's responsible for the disposal of the hazardous waste? Are we responsible if we're the tenant, we're releasing it out? No?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Councilmember Baldonegro, we wouldn't be responsible, but the problem is if the tenant doesn't have the ability to clean up, if all of a sudden he's been dumping or she's been dumping environmental waste out there, and then all of a sudden they leave, it's our airport. So that tenant might not have the ability to clean it up, and then we as a city would be forced to be in a position to clean it up. So what we're saying in this lease is don't bring it out there.
So whereas the initial responsibility is on the people that are leasing the T hangars.
But how is the owners of the aircraft supposed to maintain the aircraft?
Well,
If they can't do maintenance.
They can, but they're responsible, like to the used oil, they're responsible of disposing of that.
Okay.
And Mayor, if I may, based on that review and the clarification, I think it is something we can follow up with these examples. And it's not based on the intent, it's really based on the clarification that as long as we're not in violation of these environmental laws, there are some permitted use, and we can follow up. Dennis, I would think with a letter to that effect to file for these leases. And remember, this is a one-year lease. We can come back, you know, if the council wishes in a lesser time, but we will monitor and make revisions based on whatever experience we have during that period of time. So.
Right, and just to finish up, Mr. Mayor, it's clear paragraph B1 is all predicated in violation of environmental laws. So you can't store, you can't bring on, and you can't discharge anything if it violates environmental laws. So somebody who's just doing natural maintenance on his airplane, as long as he or she are taking care of it, storing it properly, we have no issues with that. If they're violating environmental laws, we have an issue with it. But as long as they're complying with the environmental laws, we're fine.
So no plutonium or anything like that.
Absolutely. No kryptonite.
Thank you. Did you have something, Mr. Lindeman? I'm sorry, I thought I may have heard.
No, that's fine.
Please.
I was just wondering if it wouldn't be prudent then to table this item because of all these questions and tell him that, like Mr. Fernandez says, it's got to be written down. It can't be taken for granted. It can't have intent because you can't capture intent on paper.
It's probably my fault for using the word intent, but it was just clarified by Mr. Fitzgibbons that that paragraph refers to anything that's currently outlawed cannot be brought on there. And then in the other section, it says that you can do your maintenance. And if you're going to leave your materials out there, you need to store them properly. And so I'm basing it and have confidence in Mr. Fitzgibbon that's how it reads. So I personally would like to go forward with a vote.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote on the amendment first, which is to reduce the amount of the per month lease agreements to 100 and 125 respectively. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Grijalva,
No.
Councilmember Valdenegro,
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton.
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta,
Yes.
Councilmember Lindeman,
No,
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, motion carries. Now the initial motion to approve resolution number 22-1532 with the amendment of 100 and 125. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Lindeman,
yes,
Councilmember Acosta,
We're voting on to approve the resolution with the amendment
As amended.
as amended.
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton,
Yes.
Councilmember Valdenegro.
Yes.
Councilmember Grijalva,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work and input on this matter. Item number 5, adjournment. May I have a motion?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
There a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Shelton, second by Mrs. Acosta to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
aye.
Any opposed by nay? Ayes have it. We stand adjourned at 6:38.